New year, let's go. Now, please excuse my voice. I'm slowly recovering from a cold, which is why my voice is just sounding all types of crazy. If it does. To me, it does. So, it seems that Reform UK, led by Nigel Farage, has overtaken the Tories in the number of memberships they have. Not the best news. This comes after Nigel Farage, after 7 attempts, finally made it into the House of Commons as an MP this year. Donald Trump became president of the United States, and it seems that Trump, Elon Musk, and Farage are trying to become the big three in politics. People are calling it the Trump effect. Now, Farage said it is a historical moment when the newest party in politics overtakes the oldest party, which, yes, there would be a lot of way to go for Reform to overall beat the Tory party. Tory party leader Kemi Badenoch called out Reform to say they were faking the numbers, and then it went into a whole palazzo of data scientists debating if one can fake a poll. Then Nigel started saying he will seek legal actions, and it seems like the point is being missed. Respectfully, Kemi shouldn't be arguing about the number. It's the fact that the number even exists and that her party is dying out. Respectfully. Let's actually talk about what the Reform Party stands for, because I do feel like many people don't actually know, or think they know, or just listen to what they hear in the media, or actually have no idea. So let's just talk about it. Let's talk about their immigration policy, which is what the media tends to talk about a lot and focus when it comes to the party. Reform think the UK is letting in way too many people, and they want to freeze what is called non-essential immigration. This is where all immigration workers, except for healthcare workers, cannot come into the country. They also want to get rid of the Home Office and instead create a new department of immigration. For this, they hope that immigration will be lowered all the way down to zero. And this does link to the Stop the Boat slogan that has been thrown around a lot last year. A lot of asylum seekers have been arriving to the UK through the Channel in France, which last year reached its highest number than ever before. To stop this, Reform want to create a policy where they would stop anyone coming into the UK via boat and instead deport them elsewhere, which is something the Tory party wanted to do with the Rwanda plan. And considering that went so bad, I have no idea how Reform think they're going to be able to pull that off. I'm not even joking. The European Convention of Human Rights, the ECHR, which is a really high up court who are able to put a stop to certain things like the Rwanda plan, which is a coincidence as the party actually want to leave the ECHR. And if that did happen, then Britain, Russia, and Belarus in the EU would not be a part of the ECHR. And you can kind of see why it's important that we stick with the ECHR, because they really do help with human rights issues. It seems like every party is fighting over the NHS, but no one can really get it right and actually help the crisis that the NHS are in. This is the exact same with Reform. They want to increase the amount of spending on the NHS to cut waiting time to zero within the next 2 years of them being in leadership, as well as give vouchers to those on the waiting list for private treatment. They would also end the cap on university places for medical students, which is currently 7,500 places, write off medical students' debt over the next 10 years, and let all frontline NHS workers and social care staff to pay less tax for the next 3 years. And when we think about healthcare, they want to encourage more people to use private healthcare in order to get rid of the pressure of the NHS by introducing a tax relief for healthcare users. They also want to raise fishing and agriculture to ban foreigners from fishing in the UK, and by this will increase the amount of spending by 1% to 3%. Just like most parties, they want to cut taxes. We've heard this all before. Everyone said they want to cut taxes. Yeah. But yes, Reform also want to cut taxes and lift the personal allowance threshold to £20,000, which is currently at £12,000. They also want to lift the higher rate of income tax to £70,000, where right now it's £50,000. And they want to give a 20% tax relief on private school tuition. So considering they want to cut taxes and increase spending, this is still going to cut some funds. They want to save money by bringing in employer immigration tax, where companies would be forced to pay a 20% higher rate of national insurance for foreign workers. I really hate that term, foreign workers, but yeah. The rate is currently 30.8%, which is the rate for British workers and would stay that rate for British employees. They also want 40,000 more police officers, automatic life sentences for violent drug offenders, stricter drug crime sentences, and £2 billion in the justice system. And yeah, this all seems good, but we've seen reports on how the police system is institutional racist, so who do you really think will be targeted the most here? Reform also want to get rid of postal votes, reform the House of Lords, and want a new British Bill of Rights instead of the Human Rights Act we have in the UK. They intend on getting rid of the net zero targets, which would apparently save big bucks. They would also invest in oil, nuclear power, and gas in the North Sea. By saving money for economies, they intend to get rid of it by individuals, by cutting welfare for those who don't get a job within 4 months or refuse 2 job offers, and deny benefits for people who haven't lived or worked in the UK for 5 years. So you can see why they're not very much liked, especially as it seems like it's now harder than ever to get a job. No matter what field you're in or what degree you have or what you specialize in, it's so hard to get a job nowadays. I know so many people who have struggled for ages. So these are some of the important ones, but I do think it's important that you read the manifesto to get a better insight of what Reform are actually doing instead of just listen to the media. Last year, that feels so weird. Last year in 2023, the BBC apologised to Reform for calling the party far right after being contacted by lawyers for the then leader Richard Rice. Richard said the term was defamatory and libelous. A radical right means you accept the essence of democracy but oppose fundamental elements of liberal democracy. And this is Reform. Farage and Reform go against some key elements of liberal democracy and the idea that every human being has dignity and universal rights. We just saw this in one of their manifestos as Farage wants Britain to leave the ECHR. Why would you want your country to leave the ECHR, considering it helps with our human rights? Another example of radical right politics that Reform does is believing that the nation is suffering and in deep crisis and needs a quick and radical change. Reform, as we all know, are highly passionate about immigration and how especially it is affecting our NHS system. Our NHS, our job force, housing, etc. And they always seem to blame asylum seekers and those deemed immigrants. The change for them would be simply to get rid of them. Literally, do everything they can to get rid of them. In the last few weeks alone, apparently 1,000 young people have signed up to be a member of the group. And you think this is surprising, but when the Tory party has been historically for the older generation, and Labour are become to seem more central left under Keir Starmer than they were under Jeremy Corbyn, many young people are actually exploring out new avenues. Nigel Farage has 900,000 followers on TikTok. Almost a million. I can't. Considering over the last few years alone there have been a lack of trust with society and the mainstream media, many are using independent medias and social medias now as a main source of news. Yeah, I don't know how the media is going to look in a few years' time. And I work in it. Last year, Labour pledged to give 16 and 17-year-olds the right to vote. I haven't really heard anything about that since they've been in power. When asked about this, Commons leader Lucy Powell told the BBC the bill would arrive later in Parliament. And she just said, I hope so. That's the intention. It doesn't seem that promising, Labour. It doesn't seem that promising. Ipsos data, which shows how Britain voted in the election, revealed how Reform won 8% eligible voters in the 18 to 24-year-old group, after the Greens and the Lib Dems. But Reform did come second place in terms of vote shares among the 25 to 34-year-olds. So maybe his love bombing is working. I don't know, guys. I don't know. I'm 24 and I have no idea. It seems also that Reform is quite popular with young men. And I'm not sure you've heard the term, but the thing bro vote actually kind of exists. It's basically targeting young men who are supposedly against a post-feminist world, capturing onto this and saying we need to rise above it. Nigel Farage did say once, young blokes are young blokes and they feel like the world is telling them not to be young blokes. So be real, the world is not telling young men not to be young men, I can assure you. With 16 and 17-year-olds, 35% of young men said they would vote for Reform. compared to 17% of young women. 71% of young women actually don't like Farage versus the small 9% who do like him. So we can clearly see there's a gender demographic here. And a good journalist, Tom Nicholson, made a point of saying, if you're aged between 18 and 24, you have only known the NHS in crisis, universities becoming far less carefree as inflation eats maintenance loans, homeowning becoming something you resent your better off friends for, and everyone older than you reeking that the places you talk to your friends online are cesspits, which you must be removed from for your own good. In a pandemic, Nick, a good chunk of time you'd had developing into the young adult you're meant to be. There's a sense of unfairness that still rankles. To me, this unfairness has been used for Farage to say, I can be the savior and save the crisis young people born in. I can change it. I can change Britain. Young people, I urge you just do your research. Know who and what you're voting for. Don't just read one media outlet, but read a range because it's very easy to get lost in the hole with all the information that's out there. So young people, be careful. We really are the future and we need to be careful. Many activists and reform voters genuinely see themselves not as extreme, but normal examples fighting for the people. And so the rise of reform last year hasn't come out of the blue. A lot of it has been a lot of prejudice built up in some of the media and stories, Muslims and asylum seekers and ethnic minorities. Cyrilla Braben calling people arriving by boat an invasion, which Farage and Reform have been able to use to their advantage. Now let's go to Twitter. I keep on saying Twitter, I need to say X. Anyway, social media has always been used as a sort of unbalanced place, but users who have X, now under the management of Elon Musk, are seeing how this app has become a safe place for people to post extremist and hateful views without any consequence. And so now Reform has a place in Westminster. They are unfortunately placed inside British politics. From being outsized to now having a seat means that the party will be able to use the evidence, you could say, to show that they represent the voice of the country. But while this is a bit worrying, Reform are still a very small minority compared to what they're claiming to be. With the party overstating their strength, they will use it as a way to say they are truly what the people want. And I don't really think a lot of people want Reform, I'm not gonna lie. But Elon Musk, Elon Musk, can't you just stay to being a billionaire? Like, why do you have to get into politics? Why? Elon Musk could apparently support Reform with a really, really big donation. Sometimes all it takes is one super donor to get involved. And in the UK, there isn't a cap on political donations. The only thing is you have to be a registered citizen. But this wouldn't be difficult if Musk wanted to be. Most political donations are used for ads, campaigns, and reaching out to different communities. And for the next general election in 2029, Labour actually don't know who their opponent will be. It's always been Conservatives voting versus Labour, but this looks like it could change. But we must have hope, guys. We must have hope because Nigel Farage is not popular, like at all. At all. With the Lib Dems, with the Tories, with Labour, he's not very appealing and popular in Westminster, I can guarantee you that. I mean, there is never a favourite party anyway, by the way, and unpopularity is quite normal, especially when it comes to the midterm. And I will say that for Labour, naturally it hasn't been great. They've only been in power for less than half a year and their rankings are quite low. But Reform is still not a proper political party, you could say. It may seem that the party is popular within the world of politics, but when you think about the whole world of Britain, many people do not like Reform. But despite them not being popular, as long as Labour isn't popular as well, this is probably what Nigel Farage wants. An elected government such as Labour, whose popularity is on the decline, and a country who's still not having faith in their previous government, who are the Tories. And therefore, this does give a small opening for Reform to creep through the cracks of what we're already seeing. I don't think Reform has peaked yet, even though they've started taking over the Tories just a little bit. We'll probably see more of a growth in and around areas of the UK. Farage has already said that the English Country Council elections was his first big target. The next big goal is to prioritise the 2026 Senedd elections in Wales, which is where the Welsh Parliament will democratically elect a body to represent the Welsh people. The real issue lies with Labour and how happy they make the public over the next few years. If they fail to meet the places of the communities that reform is targeting, this will give a way to reform to swoop in and try to save the day. Reform, no, we don't need to save the day. It's okay. It's okay. We know that ultimately reform wants to replace the Conservative Party as a national contender at the 2029 general election. And as we're in 2025, the lack of support for Labour and the increase of support for reform is not as worrying as people may think as yet. But it will benefit reform and other areas of far-right groups if Labour is on the decline. So we just can't lose hope that Labour will stick to their pledges. I do think as individuals we need to step in, we need to mass campaign against racism, against Islamophobia. We need to be getting out onto the streets and helping out left-wing candidates, because there are good and genuine candidates out there who have good intentions that aren't getting the coverage that they deserve. We need to build a united left, which is not going to get taken away from us. I do think politics now is up to us, it's up to individuals to try and create a country where we navigate and exist for the next decade. The next election is in 5 years. 4 years, 4 years. So there is still time. There is still time. But that is all from me. I'm Serena the journalist. What do you think about Reform UK having more members than a Conservative Party? Are you worried? Do you think this is a good thing? Beat this? Let me know in the comments. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for watching my video. See you again very soon.